Porta 1. We're going to briefly explore the collaborative efforts between the new Institute for Health Discovery and Innovation and the Institute for Clinical Trials. For this, I'm going to welcome Ted back to the stage. Ted, you've got your steps in definitely today, up and down. And I'm going to introduce Professor Fidelma Dunne, who is a director of the Institute for Clinical Trials. Apart from being an institute director, Fidelma is also a professor in medicine and an associate director of the clinical research facility here at University of Galway. She's also a consultant endocrinologist at Galway University Hospitals Group. Fidelma brings a wealth of experience in clinical research, being a highly respected figure in her field. Let's give Fidelma a warm welcome. So Fidelma, let me start with you as Director of the Institute for Clinical Trials. To begin, could you introduce yourselves, perhaps highlighting your clinical speciality and research area? And then can you give us an overview of the Institute for Clinical Trials? What is it? And what are some of the key activities you're currently involved in?
Thank you, Grania. So most people in the audience probably know me because I've been around for a while. But I'm a graduate of the medical school here in Galway. I'm a local Galway person. I did some of my postgraduate training in the Irish Health Services first. And then back then, there was no other possibility for a graduate in Ireland but to emigrate. So there was no training programs, no research opportunities. So most of us in my class emigrated. So you had two places to go, either the US or the UK. So I decided to go to the UK. At that time, there were no funding opportunities. So as well as finding a place where you could go to, you then had to find a funding opportunity to support your salary and what you wanted to do. So I was very lucky. I got a welcome fellowship to do a PhD at the University of Birmingham. I was very much out of my comfort zone because my PhD was in bench-based cellular activity, and I was looking at a new protein called parathyroid hormone-related protein, which was involved in malignancy and hypercalcemia of malignancy. But I was looking at it in a different format, looking at how it impacted on human fetal development. So that was very exciting when I got into it and got to know how to do the techniques. So after that, then I continued my postgraduate training at the University of Birmingham and then joined the faculty. And my job was half-time academic and half-time clinical. So I developed a clinical program for diabetes and pregnancy in the city of Birmingham, which had 5 million inhabitants. So that was exciting. And through that, I could see problems that existed and wondered how solutions might be found. In any event, I arrived back to Galway in 2003, and I was very lucky that my job again had 50% clinical time and 50% academic time. So very quickly, I developed a clinical program for diabetes and pregnancy, not for the city, but for the region. And then I complemented that by a research program purely in that area, diabetes and pregnancy. And that has been funded almost continuously by the Health Research Board, for which I'm really grateful. During that time, then I took a leadership role in the College of Physicians dealing with education and training and examinations, looking at quality of what we were doing and revisions of programs. And that was exciting. And when I finished there, I took a leadership role in the Medical Council, where I sat on the executive for 2 terms and chaired the fitness to practice committees. And that was really looking at regulation for medical practitioners in Ireland and where that may have, where people fall down and how we could improve the process so that people weren't in front of the regulatory body. So all that wealth of experience really has really shaped what I've done over the last 20 years. Really, the forte of what I've done, I think, is delivered a clinical trial on an old-fashioned medicine for women with diabetes and pregnancy, which is a pill instead of injecting insulin 4 times a day. And we did that trial from beginning to end here in the University of Galway. And that trial has really gaining global reach now, and I've no doubt will influence practice, both here in Ireland, but also globally. And that trial is of importance because what we talk about when we talk about reach of what you do to the global market is really important. So for many women around the world with diabetes and pregnancy, where insulin is the treatment, they either can't get insulin, they can't store insulin because they've no fridges, or they can't afford to get the insulin. So having a cheaper model of a treatment that can impact on the global stage is really important. And then earlier this year in January, I took over as director of this exciting, really high-reaching institute, which I think will really shape the process of what we do in clinical trials, both in our region, but in Ireland also over the next number of years. But I would like this institute to be very forward-facing so that we become very much an internationally recognised partner in the space.
That's wonderful. Vaughan, we're delighted to have this clinical perspective that you're bringing with us today. And as someone who's close to the patient, could you also share some insights into the challenges in translating biomedical research from proof of concept towards the clinic? What are the key issues in establishing a clinical trial for a new technology or a new treatment?
Thank you for that question, because that's really pertinent to what we're doing at the moment. So we can do clinical trials in Ireland. We can do first in human. We can do early feasibility, but we haven't been doing them at the scale in which we should, and we haven't been doing them in a cost-effective manner and delivering in a timely fashion. So part of our institute pillars of activity is exploring why that is and trying to find solutions. So that's pillar 2, trying to tame what we do so we can do it smartly, effectively, and deliver what we say we do in the time we say we will do it. So to do that, the researcher who has a novel idea, who wants to put it into an early feasibility, has to go through a regulatory process. The regulatory process involves an application to the Health Products Regulatory Agency, another application to the National Research Ethics Committee. When you get to planning from both of those, then you move on to contracting and data protection. And that can be also a scourge in everybody's mind. So there are roadblocks along the way. We've identified what the roadblocks are. We in our institute are now working with the players, so the HPRA and NREC, to smooth out those blockages, so that when somebody comes to us and says, I want to do an early feasibility, we can say, right, we can start tomorrow. 30 days you'll have product 1, 30 more days you'll have product 2, and then you can start your trial. So we need to be able to produce or show reproducibility. So there's a lot of momentum behind this at the moment. I think we will crack it. And ultimately, my objective would be to have our institute be the go-to place in Ireland and indeed in Europe to do early feasibility studies. Our other objective is really to engage and be the go-to place in Ireland and Europe to do these early feasibility studies in the medtech sector. So we all know that clinical trials are really important, be they IMP trials or be they medtech trials. We know from UK data that for every €1 put into clinical trial activity, the economy will gain €4. So it's a very cost-effective way to bring money into your economy. We're in a very privileged position here in the west of Ireland. We're surrounded by the medtech space. We don't realise really the potential that we have around us. We've been sitting here, for many years doing very little about this. So we really need to grab this potential that is sitting beside us, work with them to identify what their needs are, and try to have our institutes, both the Institute of Innovation and Discovery and our institute, provide for them what they need to bring their work into clinical trials in Ireland. And that has important benefits for our patients, because we get new technologies, new deliverables, new medicines to our patients in Ireland much earlier than other populations will get them internationally. And really that's what patients need, because the whole focus of why we're here is to improve health. The mission of our institute, the mission of the other institute, is to promote health. And we might look at health in many aspects. It could be curing the disease. It could be ameliorating the disease. It could be preventing complications of the disease. It could be genetically manipulating the fetus to stop the disease in the first place. It could be better monitoring of the disease so that the complications don't develop. So you can look at the spectrum of health in many ways. But what I know from working in the health sector and from my colleagues here in the university across both colleges, there is room for everybody. We need innovation, we need translation, and we need to be able to bring that into the clinical trial space and deliver effectively, costly, and on time.
Brilliant. You say it all so well, Fidelma. Ted, let's talk about how these institutes are going to work together. You represent the Institute for Health Discovery and Innovation, which is the foundation for the pipeline activity that is going to be taking place. In what ways do you see the institutes collaborating, particularly in creating a pipeline for translation?
Yeah, so I guess we've spoken about that pipeline throughout the day and how, things move from basic to applied to translation and to clinical. And I guess, what's important to note is that pipeline isn't linear, and it's not just as simple as, moving something on nice and easily. But I suppose the pipeline involves a community of engineers, scientists, and clinicians. Obviously, some of the clinicians sit in the Institute for Clinical Trials, but clinicians also sit in our institute and very much in the translational space. I think in terms of moving technologies on, it's the people who are, deeply involved in translation that will be able to leverage the Institute for Clinical Trials for the technologies or the treatments that they developed. But, as researchers, we identify in different areas, whether it be fundamental, applied, or clinical, and there's a place for everybody in that pipeline, and particularly maybe for the people who will bridge across the two institutes. If they're doing particular clinical work, that can sit in the Institute for Clinical Trials. But if they're doing more basic cell work, our institute can provide the supports and the expertise maybe to support that, because even though the institutes have come from the same place, how you structure and how you, the operation team that you put in to support the two institutes are quite different, because clinical trials is a very different remit to kind of health discovery research. So like that, the pipeline is not linear, and it's also not just a one-way pipeline. I think there's information moving in both directions in the pipeline. And from the work that goes on in clinical trials, there's a huge amount of data created. And there's a huge amount of learnings that we can get from clinical trials that can kind of motivate further research, trying to gain better understandings of things. And also, I think in the support of clinical trials, the engineers, the data people who you might think might sit in a health discovery and innovation institute, those people need to be able to support into the Institute for Clinical Trials as well.
Okay, Dunne, from your perspective, what other aspects do you see as important in how your two institutes work together going forward?
I think really important is communication. So unless I know what's happening in Ted's institute, unless he knows what's happening in mine, then we won't be able to collaborate. So the basic fundamental is good communication. How we do that is to be discussed. But, there's nothing wrong with the telephone call. There's nothing wrong with an email. It doesn't have to be high and fancy. So that's the first thing, good communication. The second thing, I think, as Ted says, not everything in the Institute of Discovery and Innovation will end up in a clinical trial, but some things might. And we have to protect those some things that might and nurture them along the way to a trial if it's feasible. So I would say for people working in the space where they're developing something that may go into a human eventually in a trial, it would be much better if there was collaboration between those workers and the clinicians in that space early on, with the involvement of patients also, because you might think your device will go into a clinical trial. If patients have no interest in it, then it's never going to go into a clinical trial. If patients don't see that there's a benefit to them from it, it's never going to go into a clinical trial, no matter how good it is. So involving patients very early through PPI panels, and we're very lucky here, we have the National Centre for PPI Engagement, is really important. Knowing what the device is to the clinical group who are going to use it, or the technology or the new innovation, is really important. And again, in our ecosystem here, in our hospital system, we have world-class clinicians across a spectrum of diseases who have international collaborative networks. So we really should be using this much more effectively. So there are two areas I would say that we could work on. We have traditionally worked very strongly with people in Ted's Institute in the bioscience and in the AI and data analytics and biostatistics space. So that can be developed and should continue. That's a very strong working relationship already. And of course, our clinicians work in Coram and some in BioInnovate or work with people in BioInnovate. So I think we have a good foundation that needs to be built on. But we need to realize, I think, how fortunate we are to be in the location we are, because the ecosystem that we work in and the people around us and the diversity of skills is enormous here. Yeah. And I'm not sure that we actually realize it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll sink in as time goes on and as this new development is up and running. Ted, we've seen today that Dunne was just talking about it, this comprehensive ecosystem that is here that you're beginning to truly appreciate. Apart from the relationship between both institutes, could you speak a little bit about the broader ecosystem? Again, Fidelma has been touching on it, that will support and complement the work being done here.
Yeah, so obviously we've talked a lot about the two institutes today, but I'd also like to highlight the two that you mentioned as feeding as a massive part of that ecosystem. So Coram, which is the Research Ireland National Centre for Medical Devices, they've done an outstanding job over the past 10 years in being a really formal link with industry. And, there would be a lot of complementarity in terms of, say some of the PIs in the institute also being Coram PIs. And I suppose, that's a great mechanism that we have for engaging with industry and doing co-funded or industry-funded R&D based projects through the university. And I guess, Coram has the benefit that it's a national centre, so it leverages expertise from, PIs beyond Galway. But, certainly from a university point of view, the institute is there to give the broader piece and also, deal with some of the operational aspects around, space management. We talked about equipment and, sustaining our core facilities. So the institute will support that. And BioInnovate is the other program. So BioInnovate is a hugely successful needs-based innovation program based on the Stanford Biodesign system, and it's very well thought of from all of the medical technology industry around. And I guess a key part of the BioInnovate program is really identifying a kind of a killer clinical need, and then it's about finding the technology to solve that problem. And again, in the Institute, we're hopefully developing a broad range of technologies. And I guess what we have is access to expertise. And this happens, again, organically throughout the university anyway. We're very used to engaging with BioInnovate fellows, giving our perspective, and maybe supporting them in our labs when they need to do some proof of concept work. And I think there's a piece beyond that then in when the BioInnovate fellows need to go out to, apply for commercialization funds. There's a role for our institute in supporting that through, again, being the academic lead on a project, or again, just enabling them in terms of expertise and advice and lab space and things like that.
I'm going to bring this to a close because I think you've been agreeing with each other all across, haven't you? So as a closing question to you both, what do you think are the important elements for ensuring the success of the institutes? And I have a feeling that you are going to be saying some similar things again. Fidelma.
The first thing I would say is money. Money speaks volumes. Okay. So you can sit down and say, oh, poor us, we've no money, or you can go and find money. So there's many ways in which we can leverage money. So firstly, our industry partners, we should be looking at more partnerships with them. They can then perhaps contribute to research development along certain disease tracks or disease spaces. And perhaps their staff need education. We may be able to provide that. Micro-credentialing, CME. So I think there's a lot to be gained from industrial partnerships. The second area, I think, is the greatest asset we have in our two institutes is our staff. And the staff is across a wide range. We have academic staff, technical staff, and support staff, and they all do great jobs and they're all complementary. But when it comes to doing grants, we really need to encourage our academic staff to do these grants, but we need to take the nightmare of the administration around doing these grants away from them. So people like me and Ted and people in the audience love a clinical question, love to pose what the solution might be, design what the solution might be. We love to do that part. But when it comes to what can the university provide for me? What does your institute provide for, these soft scripted sections? They can be very tedious. The financial planning can be tedious. The HR can be tedious. But I think if we really value our staff and how they contribute, we should protect them. So when we know grants are coming, we need to know what the call is. We need to prepare them early, put this support around them so that the grant has a reasonably good chance of being successful. So protecting our academic staff to bring in money is really important. And then as institutes, looking externally to have collaborations that are international, they always come with money too and allow you to do good work.
It's all back to money.
Money is important.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Same question to you, Ted. What do you think the important elements are for success?
Yeah, and maybe I won't say just money, and I think it's, we're at an advantage in that, we formed these two institutes. Each of the two institutes has scale, but the two institutes are now trying to solve the same problem when it comes to that PI burden. So we need to do kind of things that are complementary to each other and not duplicate what we're doing. I think obviously the institute team and the executive have a key role in driving activities forward. And, in the pillars that we propose, we need strong leadership in those pillars. I also think that the institute membership has a major role to play in this. And, there's been so many different research groups that have built, really good successes themselves. And, that has happened over the last 15, 20 years with maybe minimal structures around it. Now we have, a major structure around it, and we have that chance to scale. So it's kind of looking beyond the local research group and moving up to that next level. I think it's really positive, and I've been surprised since I took up my role, how many times you're invited to represent the area at a meeting or at a forum of some kind, so that there is now a voice at the table when it comes to, saying that we need extra resources or we need X or Y. So yeah, I think we've a great opportunity, and hopefully things will grow like they did from the early days in the NCBS to something that's even bigger than that in the next 15, 20 years.
So say all of us. Thank you both, Ted and Fidelma, for your contributions here today. It is fantastic to see the clear importance of collaboration between both institutes and how this can strengthen this amazing ecosystem we have here in Galway. And of course, this is only the beginning. We look forward to the success going forward of both institutes and how they can hopefully play a pivotal role in shaping the future health-based research here in the region. Not just here though, but nationally and internationally as well. To our audience, thank you so much for having the time to spend with us today. I hope you found it beneficial. And for me, that is it. Gura Mila Mahagi. Ted, I know you want to say a few words to wrap up today's conference. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was great.